Welcome to Journaling with Nature, the podcast for those who want to turn curiosity into wonder, a pencil sketch into a rabbit hole of discovery, a moment of stillness into a life full of joy. I'm your host, Bethan Burton. Let's open the pages of our nature journals and explore this world together. Hello, this is episode 74. I hope you're well and getting by as best you can in this upside down time. I have something I want to tell you about before we get into the interview. I've been thinking a lot recently about how many of us are hung up on creating pretty pictures and how sometimes this gets in the way of the joy and the freedom and the play that can be and should be part of nature journaling. I've had this idea in my mind for a while, and it's time to start getting the project in motion. So I'm going to create a regular time that we can meet to nature journal together and let go of art fears and make mistakes together and be silly and play. It's going to be live streamed on YouTube, and then the YouTube recordings will live on my channel so that you can go back to them whenever you feel like you need a bit of inspiration or a way to quiet the inner critic on any particular day. I'm calling it Creative Play for Nature Journalers. It will be short because I know there are a lot of long-form videos out there and it can be hard to find time to enjoy them. So our creative play sessions are going to be around 15 minutes or maybe less, and it'll be just one prompt or a tip about how to loosen up and let go, and then we'll have a chance to practice that prompt together live. If this sounds like something you'd enjoy and you'd like to get an email reminder when the sessions are coming up, please go to the show notes of this episode and sign up to the Journaling with Nature newsletter, and I'll be sending out more information about creative play for nature journalers really soon. So today I'm speaking with nature enthusiast Karen Houlding. Karen lives in Sammamish, Washington in the USA, close to a greenbelt and with an animal pathway behind her home where she's able to see lots of animals and plants and have some very special wildlife encounters. In our conversation, we spoke about nature journaling as a tool for both learning and relaxation, about connecting with community, and different ways of making space and time for creativity in our lives. Let's listen. Karen, thank you so much for joining me here on the podcast. It's a joy to see you and to chat with you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a joy to speak with you too.
So, as you know, I always go back and I love to chat about people's history, and I know that nature has been part of your life from the very early years, and I'd love to hear more about that, about nature in your early life.
Well, I grew up in Ontario, Canada, in rural cottage country, and we actually lived at a fish hatchery. So my father was a fish hatchery manager, and there were outdoor ponds, and we lived in one of the government homes. So we had rivers around us. There was a lake up the hill, and of course the fish hatchery was there. And so I spent a lot of time outside exploring the rivers, and in the woods there were trails. And one memory I have is we have had these birds called whippoorwills, and they literally sat in the tree beside the house, and they would do this whippoorwill sound, and it would repeat. And so when my grandfather would come to visit, he would lay in bed awake and he would count the number of times the whippoorwill. I should find out how many he got up to, but that was a really fun memory of growing up. But we always did things outdoors. My father would be looking for morel mushrooms and puffballs, I suppose, and maybe some wild asparagus. So that was fun. And we always had a bird feeder out in the backyard, so we would watch that from the kitchen window. And we had blue jays and red cardinals and rose-breasted grosbeaks and all the different,
Yeah.
nuthatches and chickadees. And so those are some great memories of growing up. And I remember doing science projects for school, and I was looking at them recently, and all of them were bird projects about birds, and I did all the drawings and trees. And so I'll have to share some pictures of those on my Instagram account. So
Yes.
that's really fun.
I love those memories. I especially love the sensory memory of hearing the birds and your grandfather counting them. That's sometimes sound can really transport us back to a place. I'm sure when you hear those birds now, it it brings
Mhm.
those memories up.
Yes, I don't think we have them here on the West Coast, but that's certainly a memory. And we had fireflies too, which we don't have here on the West Coast. So that's another fun
Mm.
thing with sight. Like you
Mm,
said, you
mm.
use all your five senses and for remembering those things.
Yeah. So tell me about nature where you are now. What do you see when you go outside? I know you have a very special wildlife area behind your house. Tell me about that.
Yes, so we live on the West Coast, east side of Seattle, and our property backs up onto the Greenbelt, a strip of forest that runs all through our community here. And we have a wildlife pathway along the back fence that is quite active at certain times of the year. And so we have deer and bobcats, bears, coyotes,
Wow.
raccoons. We've even had barred owls landing on our fence. And we have a wildlife camera out there which turns on at night. So a lot of this action is happening at night, which you you don't know what's walking past your house during the night. But
Yeah.
we actually, my husband put a video together,
I saw it. It's
compilation,
amazing.
and the deer are hopping by. The bobcats sometimes jump over the fence and walk through just the bushes, and
It must
it
be so fun to see the camera and to see like, "Oh, there's someone, there's a visitor, there's a visitor." It's like a little social highway or something.
right. I call it the Sammamish safari. So but one time we were sitting around our fire table in the backyard, just finished dinner, and a bobcat was just walking past and staring at us through the fence. And I stared back at it, and I started taking chips and throwing them on the ground so the dog didn't, run towards
Oh,
the
yeah.
fence. And, you know, um, it would just probably run away. But what a privilege to be sitting there, in
Yeah.
the evening and staring at a wild bobcat. And one morning I let the dog out, in the morning, first thing, and I heard a bark within about a minute. And I thought, that's not a normal bark. And I looked out the kitchen window. There was a bobcat sitting up in the tree about 20 feet. And so we got the camera. First of all, I went out and got the dog in. He came in quickly with a treat, luckily, and my husband was able to get some great pictures of this beautiful bobcat.
Oh my
And
goodness, how big are they?
well, our dog is about 50 pounds, and
Mhm.
this bobcat would be about the same size,
Wow.
as tall as the dog, but not. It wouldn't weigh as much. They
Mhm,
have
mhm,
long lean legs and very muscular, and then that short tail. And they really look like a house cat,
mhm.
but um, totally wild. And
Wild, I was gonna say.
yes, yes,
Wow, that's amazing. That must feel really thrilling to see
it
that.
is thrilling. And the first time we saw a barred owl on the nighttime camera, we thought, wow, what a privilege. And I said to myself, we'll probably never see that again. That was a once in a lifetime. Well, it
Mhm,
has
mhm.
come back multiple times. And even in the evening, the dog started fussing at the window, and I turned and looked out, and there it was sitting on the fence just in the
Wow,
evening. So
that's
yeah,
really special.
yeah, it's amazing.
So I know that this podcast had a little role to play in your connection with finding nature journaling, and I'd love to hear you tell that story about how you've come to nature journaling.
Sure. I was looking around on Pinterest one day, and because I kind of had been doing some art journaling and markers and things like that, and I came across a beautiful sketch of some plants and things, and it was by Jean McKay. And so I went and looked her up, and then heard her podcast episode on your podcast, and I listened to that, and I said, wow, there's a podcast about nature journaling. And I just couldn't believe it. And so that's how I got into it, and found the Nature Journal Club on Facebook, and it just opened up a whole world for me, you know, 2 years ago. And it has been just such a joy to learn about looking at things in nature in more detail and using your five senses. And I'm always, touching the plants and um, just getting them down on paper and color. And but the podcast just, it was such a spark for me to learn about nature journaling, and just listening to all of the wonderful guests and all of their differences and embracing all of it. And I just keep trying different things that different artists and people use. So
I love it. I love the thing that happens quite often, that I hear quite often, which is sometimes people come to nature journaling and they realize, oh, this is a fusion of two things that I love, which is nature and creativity. And I think it maybe that was it for you because you already had that link with art, art journaling and watercolor.
absolutely, that's how I describe it too. It's the perfect combination of nature, because I've always had nature in my life, and always been creating things, and I'm always trying new things. And watercolor became really important to me, and I've learned how to do that over the last couple of years. And that combination of being able to sketch something and not worry about whether it's perfect or looks like the picture or looks like the actual plant. I mostly sketch plants, because that's what I love, but I love observing birds and animals too. So
And now you have this beautiful blog that you share your work and your ideas on, and it has a really lovely name, and it's called I'm Chasing Butterflies. And I'd love for you to talk about your feeling and the reason why you named your blog this beautiful name.
thank you. So this last summer, I realized that there was kind of like a butterfly pathway through our backyard, and
Ah.
they would come from the neighbor's yard over the fence and go through our yard, and I'd be out there, trying to get a picture or hoping it would stop on one of our plants so I could observe it and maybe sketch it or get a great picture. But it would flit around, a little bit just out of reach, and then it would go to the neighbor's yard. And I thought, oh, I just can't seem to catch this butterfly. And it kind of was a metaphor for how I think about nature, is that you go out, you see a plant or a tree or a piece, bark, and then you look beyond that. Oh, there's this other type of tree, and there's a woodpecker, and there's and you just keep going and going, and you never really quite reach, the end. It's like an endless um, buffet. And I kind of felt like that was, the butterfly was a metaphor. You never really quite catch it, and you never really quite finish with all the nature, because it's just never ending.
That's so beautiful. It reminds me of recently I've been trying to document some of the butterflies in my backyard, and they're tricky. They're tricky because often the wings open show a whole different pattern from the wings closed. And so I there's this particular butterfly that I've been chasing, and she looks like a leaf when the wings are closed, and then open it's completely different. And I can't quite capture the open wings to identify her. But this metaphor is really, really beautiful because it is like that, isn't it? We've got a lifetime of of chasing nature to do.
Yes, and that's how I feel if you are ever, waiting in the doctor's office or waiting somewhere, waiting here or there, you can always have your journal with you and you can sketch or you can write, look at a photo and sketch something that you've seen in nature. And so, um, yeah, it's never ending, really.
I in reading your blog, in connecting with you and reading your posts on social media, I feel like you come at nature journaling from a couple of different places. And by that, I mean, I often talk to people on this podcast and I ask whether nature journaling is a head activity or a heart activity. And for you, I feel like it's both from a learning perspective and from a relaxation perspective. And I'm wondering about that. Your answer to that question, is it head or heart, and whether it's both of those things for you?
It's definitely both. I think when I first do a sketch, I really want to learn about the plant or the animal. And so I'm always looking up information. I like to write facts down on my page. And just from that activity of sketching what I see, it kind of helps me in other areas where I'm creating cards for other people. For example, sent a bunch to a senior center during the pandemic, and
Mm,
just would sketch a butterfly and put color on it, and maybe some sparkles, and a dragonfly or a beautiful flower with a word, one word like smile or sparkle or something like that. And so the combination of the learning, I have a love of learning. I'm always reading books and actually homeschooled our boys for a period of time. And that really sparked my love of learning. So whenever I am sketching something and looking at something on my walks, I'm always curious about it. Well, why is it growing this way? Or why is it this color? Why does this moss have a little red tip on the end of it, which I saw today? And
oh
so there's
wow.
always these questions that maybe don't get answered,
Mm-mm.
but we can always, I'm always curious about everything. So,
And then also, you write often about it being something that can help you relax and help you decompress from the world, and I'd love to hear about that perspective too, about the nature journaling as a way to relax.
yes. So I've seen that with my own family going into the forest. We have lots of trails here, and just taking a sketchbook and noticing how does this um, leaf come off the stem, or you know ferns. We have a lot of ferns in our. There are different types of ferns, and just sketching those things. And I've seen it create such a like a calming feeling in other
Mm.
people, and I really would like to share that with people, and just try, help people to try it so they can experience that too.
Yeah, I think so many of us, I won't say everybody, but I feel like the whole world is in need of relaxation at the moment.
Yes, yes, for sure. I wrote a couple of articles for our neighborhood magazine, and the first one was nature journaling for relaxation, and
Yeah.
so I'm hoping it'll spark some interest in people, and they just try it. You
Mm-mm.
know.
When you're nature journaling, do you include your own personal sort of inward reflections on your page, or is that more of a process that you do without putting it down?
I don't put it on the page. I'm always
Mhm.
thinking about it,
Mhm.
because mostly what I put on the page is facts and figures, like the
Mhm.
size, or
Mhm.
how does this animal move, and that kind of thing. But as far as my feelings go, what I'm very visual, so
Mhm.
when I do the sketch, I have a really hard time leaving it as pencil or ink. So I have to put some splash of color on it because
Yes.
I remember things in color.
Mm.
And so that's really important to me. And I like to mix my own colors. If I only had the three basic, cyan, magenta, and yellow, I, could really just mix any color from there. And so I really like to do that. And so yeah, I don't put my own feeling, although I am attending some of the writing workshops recently and really working on that, like the storytelling, and because there is a certain feeling that you have about the experience when you've journaled something and you think, oh, I saw that woodpecker and I remember the sound of it and how it
Mm-mm-mm.
was pecking at the tree from the sides, not from the center, and just the sound of it, and or the sound of their call as they fly over you. So I do, when I look at the pages and the color, I think about the feeling of how it was when I was there at that time.
Mm. How did you come to color mixing and color using your own, being able to mix and create your own colors?
Just through experimenting and a few classes, through Skillshare and
Mhm.
with the Nature Journal Club, and Wild Wonder. I think there was a color mixing class there, and I just really enjoy that, the variety of colors you can get.
Mhm.
And so I had two different yellows, so I took my blue and the red and mixed those together, and then mixed the different yellows and to see how they would come out. And it was really fun process. And those color swatches, you can cut them out and use them as gift tags on your gifts and things.
I love
So
that.
yeah,
That's a
yeah,
great
that's
idea.
learned that from the Skillshare class too. So yeah.
That's beautiful. I feel like you're a lifelong learner, like you're always ready and open to learn the next thing.
Yes. I am reading a lot of books at one time, at all times. So I just finished one called The Nature Fix, which had a really big impact on me because it
Okay.
was, the author was researching the effects of nature on people and how it how it can be relaxing. And she traveled all over the world to different countries. And one of the chapters that stood out was on Finland and how they have little nature trails in their forests with stops along the way that give directions on, slowing down and
Oh,
breathing
lovely.
and looking up and doing different activities to give yourself some calm. And so that book was really impactful. So yeah.
Mm, that's beautiful. Tell me about creativity in your life. I was reading your blog and it seems like you have some places you find inspiration and different ways that you set up your creative space. I'm thinking about your vision table. I'm thinking about creativity in your life and how you make space for it in the physical world and also slotting it into your days.
Yes, I call it pockets of time because that's all I have sometimes is pockets of time. So one thing I really learned, I remember a couple years ago, my creative table is in a landing area of our house where there's a back stairs and there's a front stairs. So the family is walking through this room often, and I saw my all my supplies all over the table all the time, and I thought, oh, I should really keep this cleaned up. So one day I cleaned it all up and put everything away in the closet, and I found I wasn't really feeling inspired. And so I thought, I need to have things out on the table. So I put my watercolor paper out, my markers, and got a really nice holder for all my markers and colored pencils and things. So everything's neat and tidy, but it's accessible. And I leave my pages open in my journal there so I can, if I walk past, I can quickly sit down for 10 minutes and move forward on a sketch that I'm working on and feel like I'm making progress and that I've had some creativity in my day. And so that's mostly, but the other way I find inspiration is looking at other people, what they're doing, and other guests that you've had. I always look up their Instagram and their artwork and the different mediums. I had come across a few that were using gouache, and I had been holding off. I thought, "Oh, I can't get another, my create closet is getting full. I have all these different supplies." And uh, I got gouache for Christmas because I had asked for it, and it ended up being metallic gouache,
Oh,
and
wow.
it's really fun. I'm really enjoying it. It's just different. So something that I might paint with gouache, it might not be something that I would normally paint, but it just was really, really fun to experiment with that. So now that's another medium that I'm, playing
Mm.
with, and I just like to learn about different products. And I can't go to the art store too often because I'll come home with more,
Yes, I have the
but that's
same problem.
okay. And then I have sketchbooks that I've bought and used, and seeing which one is the best paper that really works for me. And I found one, but I also make my own sketchbooks.
Oh,
And
wow.
I have leather, and I cut out the leather, I dye it, and I make the signature booklets that go inside and bind it together. And I've made a lot of gifts that way, but I have a lot here in my closet too. So I need to keep using those as well. And it's just another fun hobby and something that's you can personalize for people.
Yeah.
So
It must feel really lovely to be nature journaling in something you made right from the beginning, from every step of the process.
yes, it is. Yeah.
I really love your idea of having everything laid out because sometimes I find myself being too scattered and I always advise people to have a nature journaling kit that they can grab by the front door, and yet often my because I'm indoors, outdoors with a little one and the whole thing, and so I sometimes find myself searching for my supplies, and it really cuts the mood or it takes up too much time, and then the time window's gone. I love your idea of just having everything laid out so that you can sit down literally for just 10 minutes and make some progress and feel like you've achieved something. That's a really good tip because I think a lot of
Mhm.
people in the nature journal world, one of the barriers to actually moving forward is not having enough time, and so that's a great way just to get a little bite-sized chunk of time.
For sure. One of the things I did too is I treated myself to a really cute little bag from that I bought on Etsy, and a little pencil case that had my word of the year last year. It was wander, and it had all these plants, lavender and things on it. So I have double of everything. I keep a pencil and a micron pen in there, and a paper towel, and just a sketchbook, and that's all I really need. And I can grab that at any time and walk
Yes.
out the door. And I sometimes take my paints with me and a water um, pen or water brush, and but I don't often paint out in the field. I usually come back to my table and where I can mix and do all sorts of things and test the colors. So
I'd love to hear about that. So the different ways that people nature journal, lots of people only do it in the field, lots of people only do it at home from photographs. I'd love to hear about that for you. Is it a mixture of both, going out, coming in, and how each of those feels?
I do both. Most of the time, what I'm doing is I'm out walking in nature, and I kind of, when I do my daily nature walks, I have this little thing that I find one thing that is a special memory of that walk. And it could be that I saw a pileated woodpecker that day, or there was a really neat leaf or something, and I come back and I try to get it into my sketchbook, or I take a picture and then I come back and do that. So most of the time, and especially right now, it's cold and wintry here, I tend to come back and do those things, do
Mhm.
the journaling indoors. But I do think there's a difference when you're actually outdoors. Like this morning, I was at the botanical gardens and had my sketchbook and sketched outdoors, and it was a wonderful experience because the
Mm,
sun came out and it just there is a different feeling about it, and you're hearing the birds, you're feeling the breeze, and feeling the sun, and that's pretty special too.
mm, mm. And you have been known to nature journal while in your kayak, I hear. Tell me about
Yes.
this.
So that's yes. My husband and I both have a love of nature, and one of the ways that I realized last year that we both can enjoy this is through kayaking. And he will be, stopping to fly the drone and take pictures. For it takes anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes. And I thought, well, what can I do while I'm just sitting here in my kayak waiting? I got a tiny little 4x4 sketchbook and just a pencil and a micron pen, and it's in a little waterproof bag that we always keep out with our supplies. And so this past summer, I was able to sketch lion's mane jellyfish, which are these
Oh,
really big. They're at least, I think, 12 inches across and red, and they have lots and lots of tendrils that come down off of them. And another jellyfish that we saw for the first time is fried egg jellyfish. They
oh, tell
literally
me
look
about
like a
that.
fried egg,
Oh my
yellow
goodness.
in the center and then white, clear or white around the outside. So, and I sketched landscapes, and just different plants that we've seen. But being in the ocean is pretty neat. And bull kelp, I'm really interested in bull kelp, the kelp forests, and so I was able to sketch those, and just touch them with your
Mm,
hands as you float by, because they are really interesting, and they're so important for the sea life.
yeah.
So
Oh, how beautiful and lovely that you and your husband can share your creativity and love of nature in your own ways.
yes, yes. We do that biking as well. We're out for biking trips, and my husband makes videos again, and I can sit on the grass and look at different flowers that are blooming. Or I turned around and I saw a cherry tree, and I thought, oh, I never would have seen this if we were just biking through and not really stopping to look around. So
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
it's fun to have your journal with you, and just in case. There's lots of times I don't use it, but I have it there just in case.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
it's special when you actually can stop and and do something in the journal.
Tell me about connecting with others through creativity and nature journaling. So, you have come to the Nature Journal community on Facebook, and you have connected with others by nature journaling with a traveling sketchbook that's going around North America. I'd love to hear about this, about connecting with others through this beautiful creative activity.
Yes, so I was part of the traveling sketchbook. I'm not sure if it's still going around, but I received it and was able to sketch a few things around here that are local to us, and was really fun reading through the different um, entries from people all around the U.S. As far as it had come to me, they were in the U.S. and um, I've been participating in, the different events that when I can through the Nature Journal Club. And we have a local Puget Sound Nature Journal Club, which, of course, we haven't been able to meet in person too much the last couple of years, but we're starting to, see if anybody wants to get outdoors and just try to meet up and compare, not compare, but just see what each other is doing and what our interests are and learn from each other. So hopefully that'll be coming up this year. And
It's amazing, isn't it, that the technology that we have now, even through the pandemic and when everyone was feeling very isolated, all these new ways of using technology to connect have sort of sprung up, and I think that's a pretty special thing.
It is. It's almost bittersweet because we really want to be doing nature journaling together and um, seeing what others are doing and sharing, but we also have this blessing of being able to connect, for example, across the world and talk with each other and share our ideas and sketchbooks and just our experiences. And so that's I think that has really opened things up um, as well.
Mm-mm. Tell me about how your nature journaling has changed over time. So have do you feel like your style has changed or the things you focus on have changed, or are you just at the start of the process? Tell me about that, about change.
Well, I guess when I first started, I wanted to sketch everything and I wanted to get everything down on the page. And so I was putting too many things on one page and it was looking crowded. And so I've learned from other nature journalers to really kind of just pick a few things and maybe think about where you want to put them on the page instead of just getting it down. But just getting it down is a good thing. Um, so I suppose I've also over time have accumulated more supplies and played with watercolor pencils, and I got a really good set of colored pencils and then the gouache. And so there's lots of tools that I use now that I wasn't at the start
Mhm.
because I didn't
Mhm.
know about them. But I continue to learn from other people as well. So it's fun to try new products and um,
There's so much to learn from each other, and I love that that is one of the major focuses in the nature journal community, and John Muir Laws calls it stealing from other people's pages, and Melinda calls it harvesting, which I feel is more romantic. But just to glean ideas and to, like you said, learn from each other. And I think you attended a workshop by Jean McKay about layout, and she's
yes,
got an amazing skill
yeah.
in laying out pages to help the eye flow across the page. And yeah, there's so much to learn from each person, isn't there?
Oh, there is. That was an amazing workshop because I hadn't really been thinking about where to place things on my page to draw the eye into the center of the page and different things like that. And actually realizing that you can just do a rough pencil sketch and you can move things around, or maybe you draw things on little individual cutout pieces of paper and you can place them on the page that way too. And that was really helpful, um, doing a little bit more planning, but not getting too worried about it. That's not my pages are not sort of really polished, but more I'm trying to tell a story or a feeling about what I saw that day and how it impacted me. So
That's something I'd like to work on my own nature journal pages. I tend to just start somewhere and then they just organically spread out and end up at the edges. But
yeah.
I would like to I would like to be more conscious of planning them out.
Yes. Well, I don't plan every time, so some of my items do run off the page, or I'll have a flower here and then something else over here that is totally out of proportion, like things just aren't in proportion to each other. And
Yeah.
well, that's okay. So what I do is I just put a line on there with how many inches this,
Yes.
seed bud was or whatever it was, just to so you can realize that things aren't to scale.
Yes, and I think that that's appropriate because, sometimes we will get right down, focus on something, and in your own sort of mind and experience, it becomes very large, even though it's very tiny, but you're looking at it in close up or with a lot of focus. And so that sort of forms in your mind as something quite large. And so when you put it on the page that way, that's appropriate. So you can just indicate its
Right.
its actual size. Tell me about natural discoveries that you have been looking at lately in your journal.
I think one of the most fun things that I have been doing is we discovered a lot of mushrooms around our
Mm.
area. And I didn't realize there was a mushroom season, but this was a couple of months ago where we were hiking. We have a big, huge natural park that is attached to our community. So we hike through the trails there. And one day we must have seen about 50, at least 50 different types of mushrooms and
Wow.
fungus growing on in the ground and poking up, pushing their way up through the soil, and the soil is just kind of lying there cracked open where the mushroom has come through it, and all different colors and sizes, and um, just different shapes. And it was really incredible. I'll
That's
never forget
amazing.
that. I took a lot of pictures and I'll have to go back and try to sketch them. I have sketched the fly agaric, the amanita, which we found growing on the side of the sidewalk, in the grass here. And I just think that's the most fairy tale mushroom. And I was so thrilled to see it for the first time this last year. So it's just through nature journaling has opened up my eyes to a lot of things, and you just notice the details.
Yeah, and you wrote in your blog that once you open your eyes to something, then you just it's like your eyes are tuned to it and you just start seeing it everywhere. Isn't that an amazing aspect of it?
It is amazing. And in the same way, about a month or two ago, we went back to that same trail. And I thought, oh, we're going the mushroom trail. And
Yeah.
most of them were gone.
Mm.
It was over. They had decayed back into the ground. And I just thought, well, that was a special time. This,
Yeah.
we'll have to remember to go back again next year at that time.
Yeah, that's amazing. Recently here, we've been having just so much rain, and it has brought up all these mushrooms that I've never seen, and it's quite incredible to walk the same route that I always walk and to see these unique mushrooms that I've never seen, and to know that under there, under the under the grass, under the soil, there's this magical mix of mushrooms that
Hmm.
have the potential to pop up sometime when the conditions are just right.
Yes, very true. And we have a very wet environment here, a lot of the year, but in the grass even, the next morning you'll come out and there will be a mushroom that has popped up overnight. And so I
They
went
grow quickly, don't they?
they grow so quickly. And I ran in and got my sketchbook, and I was sitting out on the sidewalk in the front, and my neighbor was out there kind of looking at me like, what are you doing? And I was crouched down on the grass because there was this tiny little mushroom that had looked like it had the gills on the outside on the top of the cap instead
Oh,
of on the
wow.
underneath. So I thought, well, I have to sketch this. So I have no idea why it's one of those unanswered questions, but
Yeah.
it was neat to me, so I just had to sketch
Do you often get people looking over your shoulder wondering what you're doing
it.
when you're sketching outdoors?
No, but I have, run into people when I've been walking and explaining to them, oh, I'm looking for leaves so I can take them home and paint them, and they're kind of thinking, oh, wow, like that's what you do. And, yeah,
Yes.
I collect acorns and pine cones. I love pine cones, and so yeah, I haven't had a lot of people ask me about that because I'm not sitting outside
Mhm.
um, in sight while I'm doing
Mhm.
that usually. But I would love it if people came up to me. I'll have to do that more often. And
Yeah, it's another way to connect, isn't it? It's another way to open up the conversation.
Yeah, and I think maybe if people saw you doing that and they were brave enough to ask you, that would be an opportunity to share and, rip out a piece of paper and say, "Would you like to try it?"
Yes,
Wouldn't that be
yes.
fun? Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I feel like connecting with others and sharing this idea of nature and nature journaling is something that you hope to do more of in the future. And I'd love to hear about your plans and your hopes for sharing nature journaling in the future.
Well, I would really love to share it with the community. I've kind of been doing that on a micro scale with
Mhm.
making the cards for the senior center and different places. And I walked into my local library the other day and asked, "How can I host a class here?" And they said, "Well, we're not doing them in person right now, but if you want to do one on Zoom, we can do that." So I have the application, and I'll have to figure out how to do that because it would be kind of fun to just casually show people what it is and see if they want to try it. One time I was talking to a neighbor, and the kids have had been doing remote learning for about a year and a half, and they weren't getting outside a lot, and so I made some birdseed ornaments and wrote a little note with it, and I took it to some neighbors, and I said, "This, hang these in your backyard tree, and maybe you could watch and see, how many chickadees, count them and write them down on a piece of paper and see which different kinds of birds and what time of day do they come." And I said, maybe you can, tell me later what you find out. And so I just was trying to plant the seed and see if they would be able to find something new and that would get them outdoors. Um,
That's beautiful.
I'd really like to be able to share it in person with the community though. So I'll have to find some ways of doing that. And um, yeah, I think this is the year. My word of the year is ignite, which I hope. I feel ignited by all the things I'm learning from others, and I want to share that with other people who might not know about nature journaling too. So.
Tell me about the word of the year.
So for the last few years, I've been picking a word of the year, and some it just comes to me. It just
Mhm.
just so ignite was the word that came to me this year, and just all the learning that I'm doing from other people and different products, and so I just want to be able to share that with other people. And I kind of just want to do it alongside people because I'm not really wanting to be in the spotlight or anything, but like to be just alongside people, just
Mm,
sharing what we see and
mm.
getting it down. And
What you were saying about sharing nature and creativity on a micro scale, I think that that is incredibly powerful and incredibly important. And I'm learning this through my life that it can just take one moment of sharing with someone to deeply affect their lives. And I think what you did with the bird feeding ornaments and just that reaching out, and you don't know what effect you had with your cards that you created and sent to the senior center, but
Mhm.
that those little moments of outreach, those little moments of sharing can be incredibly powerful and in sometimes life-changing. And I think that there's power in that we don't fully understand, but continue what you're doing because it's absolutely beautiful and powerful and important.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I will definitely do that because that's part of what I love to do is
Mm,
just create cards and give them away. And
mm.
I think it would be really fun to build a Skillshare class someday. It'd probably take me all of this year to figure out how to do that, but I have ideas, and I just think that would be really something, another way to share as well, because I've learned so much from others on Skillshare. That's a
Mm.
lifelong learning system there too. So Yeah.
Thank you so much for being with me here today and for sharing your thoughts and feelings about nature journaling with the listener. Thank you,
Oh,
Karen.
thank you. It's been such a joy to chat with you today and share our message.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Karen. I really liked the ideas she shared for how to fit nature journaling into our days. Having a creative space all set up with paper and art supplies ready to go, so that when there's a spare moment in our day, we can take the opportunity to squeeze in a little bit of nature journaling or creative time. I also really enjoyed hearing the things that Karen does to connect with others and bring a little bit of nature and inspiration into the lives of people in her community. I really believe that these moments of connection can be incredibly meaningful and significant. Visit the show notes for this episode to find links to Karen's website and Instagram, where you can see her nature journal pages and follow her nature journal journey. I wanted also to let you know that there's a new feature on Spotify where listeners can now give a star rating to podcasts. Up until now, there wasn't a feature for rating podcasts on that platform. So if you're enjoying this podcast and listening on Spotify, I invite you to go and give the podcast a 5-star rating if you want. And if you're listening on Apple, you can also rate and review the podcast. And this just helps the show be found by other people who also love nature and creativity. Thank you so much for listening. See you next week.